Hi, this is lecture one for imperialism. We're going to talk about how the United States became an empire. You can look at this political cartoon right here and see that Uncle Sam is basically staking his claim all over the world, and it's kind of a menacing looking Uncle Sam there, and just kind of showing that imperialism isn't always the best thing. There's positives and negatives to imperialism. Good things being that we as the United States were gaining more territories, but bad things is we're taking over people's land, we're hurting other people's cultures in order to gain for ourselves. So we're going to go through the introduction here and talk about what imperialism is and why we were imperialistic. Okay, so we want to remember expansionism. Okay, we had the idea of manifest destiny, and hopefully you remember what manifest destiny is when we talked about spreading westward. Um, we wanted to close the western frontier, moving to enlighten these areas. We pushed Native Americans off their land and moving them more and more west. That was manifest destiny. And the important thing about it is that it was destiny that was given by God. God was basically telling us that we were supposed to do that. And that was provided for a lot of the justification that we needed in order to do this with a clean conscience. Okay, so the western frontier is now closed. We've moved all the way to the western frontier. So what's left? We have Hawaii and we have Alaska. So those are the two territories we're going to talk about today. So the idea of imperialism, imperialism is when we begin to move outside of our borders and into foreign nations. So it's not imperialism when you're within your own borders, but once you move outside the borders, then it's imperialistic because you're going to take over other territories that don't belong to you. So we knew that we couldn't go to north to Canada because that had been closed earlier in treaties. The south of Mexico was shut off through the Mexican-American War. So what else is left? Obviously, Alaska and Hawaii. So the first um, thing we're going to talk about here is the motivation for imperialism. So why did we want to be imperialistic? So the first thing is the desire for military strength. Okay, we noticed that European countries had begun to establish their own military presence. Um, they're growing a navy, and they have ports all over the world. And in order to be a really strong military power, you need to have ports in all the different oceans. So if we become more imperialistic, we can have naval ports around the world, and we can get our navy to places really quickly. Secondly, is the thirst for new markets. American industry had flourished uh, through the Gilded Age, because this is running kind of parallel to the Gilded Age and then a little bit past. But Americans, our industries are doing so successfully that we need a place to sell our goods, and we don't have enough markets in the United States, so we need to move outward. So if we have people in other countries that will buy our goods, that's really good for us. And then a belief in cultural superiority goes along the lines with manifest destiny, where we believe that we're better than everyone else and we need to make everyone else better. People can't survive on their own, so we need to go and help them. So it's like that moral justification that we believe that we are actually doing good, and when in actuality we're probably not really helping the native countries. All right, and here's a little quote from Josiah Strong talking about this cultural superiority. He says the Anglo-Saxon race, and especially its American branch, represented the great idea of civil liberty and pure Christianity, and was divinely commissioned to spread its institutions over the earth. So this is kind of just giving the justification that people believed that we were better than everyone else. All right, so Alaska. Alaska is a territory of the Russians. It's kind of seen as that last continental territory obtainable by the U.S. Canada hadn't snagged it yet, so we felt that maybe it was something that we could get. A man by the name of William Seward, he was Secretary of State under Lincoln and Johnson. He advocated for this purchase, and it would cost us $7.2 million, only 2 cents per acre, so a really good deal. And he acquired it in 1867 and received a bargain because of its rich land, the land rich in resources. When Seward bought Alaska and pushed for Alaska, a lot of the American media believed it was a really bad purchase. Like, why are we wasting $7 million on a piece of frozen ice? They called it Seward's folly, and actually, and really criticized him for this. Little did we know at that time the amount of oil that was there, and oil wasn't as necessary back in the 1860s. It was still kind of a new thing that we didn't really know what it was. So oil became important, and it turns out Alaska was a great purchase. Next, we have Hawaii. Hopefully you guys have all been to Hawaii or know what Hawaii is all about, but it's an amazing place. Really good weather and really ideal for growing crops, especially like, tropical fruits. So we have a ton of island planters there, and they're making a lot of money off, pineapples, bananas, coconuts, all those things that are grown there. And they start to take over political life. The natives' power is slowly taken away. We brought disease, and we brought missionaries, and missionaries again showing the moral superiority. Same sort of things that we did with the Indians. Okay, planters grew sugar, okay, as well as all these other crops, and they used Asian labor, and Asian labor was cheap labor. You didn't have to pay Asian immigrants as much as you had to pay other people. So it was a good way to make even more money off your product. Alright, so we end up annexing Hawaii. Okay, Hawaii does not immediately become a state. It doesn't become a state till way later. This woman on the bottom, her name's Queen Liliuokalani, and she was the rightful ruler of Hawaii. And she stubbornly stood in the way of the U.S. businesses' profit and control. She wanted to maintain Hawaii. Her kind of saying was a Hawaii for Hawaiians. She didn't like the fact that all these American people were coming over and taking over her land. During this time, U.S. businessmen, they fixed the Hawaiian Constitution to give them exclusive suffrage, meaning that they were basically controlling what was going on. They had all the voting rights in Hawaii. So the Queen fights back and promises to return her native Hawaii to the Hawaiians. In 1898, Sanford Dole, the name should sound familiar, from like Dole pineapples, and the U.S. businessmen stage a revolt, and they basically go to the United States and they ask to make a provisional government and get the U.S. To annex Hawaii as a territory, and it becomes successful, and that's how we got Hawaii, and then we will make Hawaii a state later on, but we kind of take it over for business reasons here. Okay, and that's it for first lecture of imperialism.